the cause of justice, and John, you and Bob know this very, very well, and this wonderful woman from BICCP, whom I know, whose name I forget. Ann, that's right, we work together. And everyone can play a role. Thanksgiving, there's room for everybody. I helped the Justice Department under Obama start a program looking at the role of the faith community in crime and violence prevention and community building. I wind up getting sort of a template of three rough areas. They do overlap, but they're reasonably clear. One is the programmatic, and a lot of you know this. 200 chaplains riding in police cars in Baltimore, which helps both traumatized citizens and the police, who themselves are trained. Brooklyn's Youth and Congregations program that I mentioned, Joe Hines. Peace marches all over. Site for gang truces in LA and Chicago, the faith community. Safe places for Head Start, after school programs, midnight basketball. Grandma Hugs in Oxnard, California, that's all it is. Grandmothers who go to third graders, most of whom are in a terrible family situation. All they do is hug the kids. And the one who runs it says, the line for the hugs at recess goes around the school. Community renewal in Shreveport, faith-based, basically a service center in the middle of the roughest community. Second is policy. Interfaith communities meeting with mayors and chiefs. This is very interesting. The New York Times did a study on why certain cities blew or didn't blow after an officer-involved shooting. And they found in the cities where, and there will always be officer-involved shootings, the cities where it didn't blow had ongoing, passionate, intimate relationships with the faith community. They know them. In Boston, they review the tapes after an officer-involved shooting. The cities where it didn't work is where the mayor or the chief says, faith community help. The faith community says, where have you been? It is that established relational piece. And obviously your work here, faith-based, faith-driven, and your wonderful successes, John, in the General Assembly. When I served as president and CEO of the National Crime Prevention Council, and this is the last piece of this, the faith community, the policy, the program, and the personal. I started a program called Youth as Resources, where kids spot social issues about which they're concerned. And if funded as a mini-grant program, they run them. Our youth policy tends to educate, to fix, to control. Very rarely do we say in this fractured, lonely society, we need you, you're part of this. Youth as Resources wound up serving about 400,000 kids nationwide. But I'll never forget Aaron Jacoba with this work with tough kids, kids on the edge, probation kids, because it started basically with your Honor Society students. Aaron Jacoba was locked up at the Indiana Girls' School. Her work was to go into an institution where kids were housed who had terminal cerebral palsy. She turned to me from the podium at a ceremony for my first failed retirement, first of 3 failed retirements. She looked at me and she said, Jack, when I came into the institution, it was the first time in my life I have ever been thanked. Where has her name been? I thought this is the only time her name has been called positively. Think about it. Where's her name been? Stubborn children lists, foster care lists, police blotters, court dockets, correct? Aaron Jacoba, stamped with shame. How many kids out there, friends, are anomic, without name, or who can't stand their names? How are they named? Who names them? Who claims this? We, the church, does this in baptism. We name you. You're Robert, you're Bob, you're Ann. And in some churches, you are named by God, but you are taken down the middle of the aisle and say, welcome to the community. Both. And if we don't name and claim our kids, who will? I know. The gangs will. The gangs will rebaptize. So we become Needle, Highboy, Ratman, real names from the LA gang files. Peacekeepers have started to go out into the community late at night, and most of them are ex-cons who are doing well. And they're with these kids. They're intervening. And one of them, and I know time is running a little short, John, I wanted to see how they did their work. So I was in East Oakland near the stadium, 11:30 at night, with Billy Dupes, Jay Jimenez, and Kevin Grant. They looked at me and they said, "Man, you got the wrong threads for gang work, man. You got to get new clothes." And then they asked me what I drove. And I said, I think it was a Subaru at the time. I drove a Subaru. He said, "Man, you got to get low wheels and some spiked hubcaps, man. You don't know what you're doing." And I said, if you guys are so good, John's got his salt boys in the corner at 12 o'clock at night looking tough. What's the first thing you say? Without a nanosecond's reply, he said, "Hey, loved one," or "Hey, nephew." "Hey, loved one." That was his first response. The language of claim. The language of claim. It's embrace. And Kevin, in my book, Policy Walking, just says this beautiful phrase when I asked Kevin, why didn't these services take? He said, because nobody walked with them. Nobody walked with them and knew the pain, the shame, the anger. He said, you got to start with walking and you got to start with love. You don't start with fixing. I close with a vignette from also a program that's had extraordinary effect, extraordinarily positive. It's called Call-Ins. Imagine a horseshoe. On one side of the horseshoe you have cops, on the other you have the helping community. And in the back sit the offenders who are present at this drama. I was in one in Stockton. The guys' rap sheets were up on the wall. These were some of the heaviest offenders in Stockton. ... arrested for this, served time before, ... There were 4 of them. I'm sitting in the back, facing the horseshoe, and in back of a guy with dreadlocks, and his muscles are rippling out of his t-shirt. So the cops read him the riot act. You've done this, you've served time before. If you so much as jaywalk, you're going back to Leavenworth. But, the cop said, please, we don't want this to happen to you. Listen to those in the service community. And they all spoke. Faith community, drug abuse, addiction, AA, job training, schools. And then, and this is the high point of it and the point of this vignette, the moral voice of the community comes out. So in the middle of the horseshoe comes Kathy Jenkins with a sign, and the sign says, Andrew. She introduces herself. This is my nephew, Andrew, who was slain. Then she comes up close to the guy who's right in front of me and said, son, what's your name? And he flexes that t-shirt, almost ripping it, and says, Popeye. She takes 2 steps closer and said, that's not what your mama called you. What did your mama call you? And you could see Popeye shrink, visibly shrink. And he whispered, Kevin. So where were we? Where were we when Kevin's name became tattered, an object of shame? Where that name, Kevin, was not a blessed name, as it should have been. And that's how we in the faith community can be there, reminding that he is good. Israel, I have called thee by name, thou art mine. To me, the heart of theology, the heart of social policy. Let Isaiah have the last word. Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the thongs of yoke, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover him, and not hide yourself from you? Then this, and I love this part, then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up, and your ancient ruin shall be rebuilt. You shall rise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorers of the streets to dwell in. Psalters, I know, you will keep on keeping on. Thank you.